She loves it.
This is for you, Rachel. All right. Function notation. Does anyone recognize this when it has the f parentheses -1? Does anyone recognize that? What to do with that? It's read when you have f parentheses -1. This is how you read it. F of -1. This would be f of 0. This would be f of 3/2. That's how you read it, okay? Basically, what function notation is a fancy way to write let sub x in for and solve it. So if I said let x be -1, sub x equals -1 and solve it, what are you going to do? If my directions were sub x equals -1 and solve, what would you do? You would put the -1 in for x and solve it. This is the exact same thing, only it's written fancy. Right? Fancy Nancy books? Anybody familiar?
Yeah.
Fancy Nancy, love her. Okay, so this is just the fancy way of x. You don't know Fancy Nancy?
Who's fancy?
She's in a book. It's a book.
Jeez, go to the library. Okay, so f of -1 would be put -1 in for x and solve it. So I would have -4 times -1 plus 2 is going to equal 4 plus 2 is 6.
What about the G?
What? No, I'm doing function notation for the g function. So that means f of -1 for my g function is 6. You're just subbing. You're just subbing.
Did you just get
Where'd
6?
you get 6 from?
4 plus 2?
I mean,
-4 times -1 is 4.
Oh, okay.
4 plus 2 is 6.
I only solved it.
Yes, and then you solve it. Yes. So f of 0, right? F of 0 means you're going to put 0 in for x and solve it. Right? You're doing all three of these for the same function. What?
I'm a bit of a predicament. I grabbed the wrong folder.
Well, go get the right folder. Smith spot. Here you go. So if I put 0 in for x, I would have -4 times 0, which is 0. 0 plus 2 is 2. So f of 0 for this function is 2. Right? I'm just subbing the value in for x and solving.
Oh, is fx?
So f of 3/2, what am I going to do with 3/2?
Put it in for x?
Put it in for x. So I'd have a -4 times 3/2 plus 2. Now this is where mental math comes in. If you don't hate mental math, use the calculator. That's why I gave it to you. This would be
1.5.
-12/2, which is -6. -6 plus 2 is -4.
How do you put in a fraction on your calculator?
You do 3 divided by 2. You would go -4, parenthesis, 3 divided by 2, close the parenthesis, add 2. Or you can change it to 1.5. Got it? Okay, let's try another one. So again, see how I'm on number 2 now, the h function? I'm going to do this h function for all 3 again. Do you have a question?
Yeah, for 4, are we supposed to add 1?
Yep, subtract 1. Yep, subtract 1.
Wait, so what's the answer?
You have 3 answers. F of -1 is 6, f of 0 is 2, and f of 3/2 is -4. You're doing all 3, so you should have 3 answers for each function. Okay, so this one, again, I'm going to do f of -1. What does f of -1 mean? Sub the -1 in for x and solve it. So -1 squared minus 3. -1 squared is a +1. 1 minus 3 is a -2. So I know f of -1 is -2. I got one of them done. I got 2 more still.
I got -4.
Did you put parentheses around the -1 when you squared it? Because it's going to be, yeah, if you don't put parentheses in your calculator, it'll give you a -1. Then f of 0. So f of 0 means put 0 in for x and solve it. So 0 squared minus 3, -3.
Jeez Louise.
And then the last one, 3 halves, right? I'm gonna run out of room. I'm running too big. F of 3 halves would be 3 halves squared minus 3, which you could do 1.5 squared minus 3 in your calculator. That's fine. If you're doing mental math, this would be 9/4 minus 3. Square the top, square the bottom. Get a common denominator, right? This is why you're going to want to use your calculator, right? Because now you have to get a common denominator. 12/4, which would be a -3/4 or -0.75. If you put 1.5 squared minus 3 in your calculator, you should get a -0.75. As long as you're not rounding the decimal, I'm fine with decimal answers, but don't round. Because that's how spaceships blow up. Remember the spaceship with the teacher and it blew up
No.
way before you were born? It was because of a rounding error. It was all because of a rounding error.
Wait, what happened?
A teacher won a trip to space, and it blew up when it took off. It blew up in the air.
Did she die?
No,
Yes.
she
We'll get it from someone. I ran out of room. Okay, so let's do this one. F of -1. What am I doing with -1? I have 2 x's to sub in this time. I'm subbing -1 in for this x and this x. So it'd be 3 times -1 squared plus -1, which would be 3 plus a -1, which is 2.
Kevin, next time you do this, can you give us more room?
Yeah.
Thank you.
F of 0, you put in 0, so it'd be 3 times 0 squared plus 0,
Ow.
which is 0. You're putting 0. 3 times 0 squared plus 0. You're just subbing this number in for x. So like f of -1, 3 times -1 squared plus -1.
Life's crazy.
3 times.
You got to do it with -1, 0, and 3 halves.
So,
And the last one, I think we just do one more. I would have 3 times 3 halves squared plus 3 halves, which this would, you'd want to use a calculator, I would. But I like a challenge. 3 times 9/4 would be 27/4. 27/4 plus 6/4 would be 33/4. But you can use a calculator. Go ahead. That's fine. Yes. Yes.
So why would it just be x of blank? Because the f means literally nothing here, because all the variance are just that goes in with the.
What?
Like, why wouldn't the variable that substitutes in be like an f or something like that? It's just literally like an x every time.
Yeah, because it's g of x.
So why is it gotta be so more complex than to say like?
Right. If I said let x be -1 and sub it in, right? It's the same thing. This is just a fancy way of saying sub that number in for x.
Okay,
That's all it is.
That saves me a lot.
Yep. Well, I said that in the beginning. You can watch the video. I said it. I said it. If this is just a fancy way to say sub this value in for x and solve.
Good luck,
Good luck.
Where's the game?
I hope you lose.
I can't wait to watch
Now,
the
do you
video.
know- Go with that. Big spike. Big spike.
All right, 2 more examples here. With graphene. No, I think you guys got it. Yeah. When you are graphing with a function and function notation, to graph this you need a table, input-output table to find
Oh my
points to
God.
graph. So you remember this,
Yeah.
From the other day.
okay? So I need some inputs. I like to use small numbers. Of course I want to do -2 and 0 because I'm going to have to find the answers for those anyways. And then I would pick positive 2, 1, negative 1, right?
Oh.
Pick some small numbers.
Why'd you pick so many?
Yeah, why did you have
Because you need a good idea what that graph's going to look like.
But you can grab anything.
Now, 2 points make a line. This isn't a line. This is quadratic. Okay,
You know
so
what?
I'm going to put, right, if x, my input is negative 2, my output would be my y. That's a point, xy point. So to find- Right, I'm going to put negative 2 in for x and get my output. That's a point now.
How do you know that's 0?
Because 4 minus 4 is 0. Negative 2 squared is 4.
You can barely even see the 2.
So I would graph negative 2, 0, which is right here.
The next one is -4.
So put in 0. 0 squared minus 4 would be negative 4. That's another point. 0, negative 4. Put in 2. 2 squared minus 4 again is 0. 4 minus 4 is 0. So 2, 0.
Wait, why is it 2?
Because 2 squared minus 4 is 0. So 2, 0. 2 squared is 4. 4 minus 4 is 0. Put in 1. 1 squared minus 4 would be negative 3. So that's a point. 1, negative 3.
Dude, I have so many points.
And then put in negative 1 is again negative 3.
Why do you go to yellow?
1 minus 4 is negative 3.
Wait, you always use the 2?
I would use the negative 2 and 0 for sure because I have to solve those anyways.
We're supposed to put them.
Yeah, I always pick small numbers. I wouldn't want to pick 7. That'd be too big.
Oh,
So you pick x values. You're picking the black numbers. Those are the numbers you pick, input values. You sub those black input values into your equation. The answer is the output value, the y value. So you're creating points. So there's the graph, and then to answer, f of negative 2 is what? We solved that, 0. And f of 0 is what? We solved that also, negative 4. It said graph and then evaluate. So we graphed it using the table, and we evaluated right here. Okay, should we do one more?
yes. Do you have any more after this?
No, this is the last one.
Is that our homework?
Mhm.
Why
Wait, we have to do it.
And math Excel.
Both? Just both. Why have we
Wait, we
done
have 2 homework assignments.
We still have an hour?
Chapman,
How do you
An hour
expect
to
to get
meet
20 problems done in an hour?
I'm gonna take you down.
Bring it.
Oh.
Small
So
and
like-
almighty.
Oh my gosh.
All right,
Can
you
we
should
have to do this on our
hopefully
own?
recognize this as a linear equation. And some
Oh,
of you
we
might be
don't
able to
do
just
it.
graph it, graph a line. If not, let's make a table.
Grab the line.
Okay, so negative 2, 0, 2. Now, I would not want to pick 1, and I would not want to pick 3s. I'm going to go up to 4, negative 4. Why?
I don't know.
Why wouldn't you want to pick
A lot of times in Algebra 2, you need to foresee what's going to happen. Now look at this. I know when I'm going to put my input in for x, I'm going to be multiplying it by 3 and then dividing by 2. I do not want an odd number because I cannot divide odd numbers by 2. If you're using a calculator, go ahead. You'll get decimals, but that's fine. But since I'm up here being awesome using my mental math,
Oh, cool. Oh,
I know I want numbers that I can divide by 2. So it's easier.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I was going to say another soothsayer.
So 3 halves times negative 2, right? I'm going to put negative 2 in for x, plus 1. What happens? My 2's cancel out, and I get negative 3 plus 1 is negative 2.
There's too much work on one problem.
You need to like slow down maybe.
Okay.
Now you can keep going.
So put in 0. 3 halves times 0 plus 1,
Just one.
that's 1. 3 halves times 0 is 0.
What?
3 halves times 0 is 0.
2.
3 halves times 2, again your 2's cancel out. 3 plus 1 is 4. 3 halves times 4. What's 4 divided by 2? 2. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 plus 1 is 7.
Ooh.
Right? Remember, if that totally sucks for you, that's okay. Just go 3 halves times 4 in your calculator plus 1. Use your calculator. That's fine. Don't freak out that you can't do that.
You can't freak out. How do you do this?
How'd I do this? 3 times 4 is 12. 12 halves is 6. What's 6 plus 1? 7.
Next one, -5.
So
Yeah.
3 halves times -4 would be -12 halves, which is -6, plus 1 is -5. Now graph those points. So what am I graphing? -2, -2, 0, 1, 2, 4, 4, 7. Oh, it's going to go off a little bit. That's all right. -4, -5. And you should create a line. This is a linear function.
Wow.
And I evaluated, I already have them. F of -2 was -2. F of 0 was 1.
Whoa, it's a line.
Wow.
Something else you can do with this, real quickly. What if I just had this picture, and I said find f of -3. How do you use the graph to find f of -3? Yeah, x. This is saying that x is -3, right?
Yeah.
So when x is -3, what's y? -3. Yeah.
I knew that.
Right? So you don't always have to have the function if you have the picture of the
Let's do this.
graph. Okay, you can just say when x is that, maybe even draw a vertical line of x is that, and then find where it hits the graph. What's the y value?
We have to do this one too then?